most excited about that project. I named it after Legacy West. Fields West, same thing, is on the west side of the tollway, and very similar. It's going to be a little bigger, about 25% bigger than Legacy West, but the same concept, mixed-use project with retail, restaurant, entertainment. We also signed agreements with Marriott Corporation for a Ritz-Carlton Hotel and autograph collection. So it's going to be incredible development, and I can't wait to start that one. So that's on the west side of the tollway and Panther Creek. So that is the kind of massive model, we call it, shows you what Fields West is going to look like. And that's the inspirational thing that my team putting it together, is you will see a lot of similarities to Legacy West development. That is Northfield's picture. No, I'm sorry, I'll take it back. It's also Legacy Fields West. Northfields. That is north of PGN. If you be Legacy Town Center, that's kind of what we had in mind to creating the north side of PGN Parkway along the 380 until 175 acres south. And you see the PGN workers there. So I can talk literally hours, but I'm told by Mr. Lackner, cut it short.
You got 9 minutes?
I have 9 minutes, I promise you. So what I will rather do, I will be here, I'll be happy to answer any questions. Obviously, I'm the guy involved in every phase of this development, every aspect of it. So, you know, about 8-9 months ago, this opportunity came, Universal. People asked me what I think, and I felt that it was a very good match with what we were planning, the quality of things that they planned. And when they explained us what they were going to do, we got more excited. So I'm thrilled that we were chosen, Frisco was chosen for this great development. With that, it's my pleasure to introduce the president of Universal Ventures, Paige Thompson. Paige.
All right, hello everybody. It's great to be here with you tonight. I'm Paige Thompson. I've worked for Comcast, NBC Universal for more than 20 years now. I've worked in every part of the company, from the cable side of the business to the programming side, running the Golf Channel, and now I'm in the theme park division for the last 8 or 9 years. We shared some exciting news this morning about what we're doing here in Frisco, building a park specifically geared to children 3 to 9 years old and their families. And that's the most important message I have for you tonight, is this is not the type of Universal resort that we have in Orlando or we have in Hollywood. This is a new concept designed for children 3 to 9 years old and their parents and their grandparents and their friends. So Universal is a big company. We operate 5 parks around the world, in Osaka, Beijing, Orlando, Hollywood, and in Singapore. Singapore we don't operate, that's a license, but all the other ones we own and operate. And we're known for building these immersive environments where you can interact with the stories and the characters from the movies and the books and the games that you really love. And we have millions of guests every year. More than 45 million guests around the world come to our parks. We have 50,000 employees. We're regularly rated as one of the best companies to work for in the United States, one of the best companies for women. We're one of the best companies in Japan and China, everywhere where we do business. So I hope that your sons and daughters and everyone will come to work for us here in Frisco. We really, with the support of the mayor, the city council, and all of you, we hope to make this park a reality. And we're very committed everywhere we go to being a really good neighbor to the communities where we work. And last year, our team members spent 35,000 hours volunteering in the community. And we work very closely with all the local schools. We're very excited about the opportunity to partner with the University of North Texas all the local hospitality programs and all the other programs that are here in the market. So let me talk a little about the specific project we're talking about building right here. We can just put that up on the screen. Okay, so as I mentioned, this is a park designed for 3 to 9 year olds. So everything about it is appropriate for that audience. The scale of it is about 30 acres, including the hotel and the park. We've bought 97 acres of land, but we're only going to use about 30 of it for the first phase of this operation. And that gives us a lot of extra space for us to have parking, for us to have really easy exit and entrance into the park. And we'll talk about that a little later. And it allows us room for expansion too, so we can build more in the future. Now, one of the questions I was asked today by one of the reporters was, as you do these future expansions, are you still going to be focused on kids 3 to 9 years old? The answer is yes. Everything in this development, everything we're doing here is focused on 3 to 9 year olds. So when you think about what that means for operations, that doesn't mean you open at 6 o'clock in the morning, okay? Because they're not up, and the parents aren't getting the kids out of the house, right? So everything about it, we're not going to be open until 10 o'clock at night because the kids are asleep, all right? So everything we're doing is related to that. So what are we going to have inside this park? We're going to have lots of family-friendly attractions. If you take your kid to one of the big theme parks here, they're going to find that they can't get on a lot of rides. They're not tall enough. So we're going to design all the rides so the kids can get on the rides with their parents, and hopefully they can enjoy a good experience together. We're going to have a lot of interactive and playful shows. We're going to have meet and greets with all our beloved Universal characters. For anyone who doesn't know, we have a huge library of characters. So Kung Fu Panda, Madagascar, Shrek, the Minions, Where's Waldo, Curious George, I could go on, Puss in Boots. There's a long, long list. Gabby's Dollhouse, for anyone who has a preschool girl right now. These are the kind of properties that we'll look to use in our park as we build it out. We're also going to have a lot of fun food and beverage. We're going to have all sorts of special retail, and we're going to have a 300-room hotel, which will be designed for families. And we hope that people will either do a staycation if you're from the Frisco area and take your kids there for a weekend, or maybe someone will come down from Oklahoma or something like that and stay in our hotel and enjoy everything else there is to do here in Frisco. I mentioned how we interact with the community here. We're going to create thousands of jobs at this park during construction and during ongoing operations. But I think we're also going to create a lot of jobs in the community too, because we're going to be looking for people to supply us with food. We're going to be looking for electricians to come in and fix things. We're going to be looking for entertainers and artists to help us with the development of our ongoing build out. And so I think the other thing I just want to mention is, one of the sayings we have at Universal is we want to put the park back in the theme park. What does that mean? That means we're going to have a really lush landscape environment. We're going to think a lot about putting in the right trees and plants and flowers and things, so that as your kids are playing in the park, in one of our play areas, which they only one entrance and exit, they're not going to run off. The parents can sit back and they can enjoy themselves and just feel like they're in a nice, tranquil, peaceful environment. And you'll see the way we've designed the park, the park is in the middle, and surrounding it are lots of trees and things like that to serve as screening. So we're going to do everything we can to be a good neighbor and develop the appropriate park that children are going to enjoy for decades to come. So thank you very much. I'll turn it over to John.
Sorry, see, I get excited, I forget things that's not part of the program. Can you put one of the earlier slides? So one of the things that really I'm also really proud, the support of our great council and city leaders, we entered a development agreement, my partnership. So rather than city building certain roads, we took the responsibility of the building these roadways. So there is a slide that, so when you look at across the street, they're under construction, Legacy Drive. So if you're taking Legacy, which dead ends at Panther Creek right now, all the way to north to PGA Parkway, and there is a little section. Oh, you have to go up there, please. No, go down. There we go, that's the map. So that's the red ones that are highlighted in red is the roads that we're building and planning to build. So currently under construction, Legacy Drive, taking from Panther Creek all the way through 80, and then Fields Parkway, which is coming from Teal all the way to Tollway. That is the first phase of the road construction. Second phase, which is gonna start this August, that's on the east side of the road. Fields Parkway turns under tollway, comes to Frisco Street. And we're gonna take the Frisco Street from Panther Creek all the way to PGA Parkway. And that's gonna start in August this year. We're hoping to finish in December of 2024. And then city, part of our agreement is gonna start Panther Creek. We are hoping to finish the drawings this March or April, and with the project start Panther Creek, taking it from Toll Road all the way Preston Road. And they hope to finish that first quarter of 2025. Part of our agreement with city and tollway authorities, you're gonna see it is under construction. They are taking down the current Fields Bridge underpass. They are making it much larger bridge under the toll road. Also, tollway authorities started from 121 all the way 380, make the toll road 4-lane on each side. So, and then one additional thing that with great support of our city leaders, we're taking the service road from Panther Creek all the way 380, additional lanes, currently 1.5, 2-lane kind of situation. So that will be corrected. It will support the growth that's taking place. I thought that is very important. I meant to tell you. So that thank you for putting up the construction mess. We're trying to be as careful as we can, but we're building a beautiful roadways. And John, I had 9 minutes, so I haven't used it up. So another thing, the development agreement with the city helped me to do 2 things: expedite rather than waiting the public process. We took it in a higher speed to open the Legacy and Fields Parkway. But also our agreement with the city allowed us to do certain enhancements. So that what does that mean? Legacy Drive from Panther Creek to PGA Parkway, Fields Parkway from Teal to Panther Creek, and all the roadways, they're gonna have different medians, planters, different light poles on type of enhancement that we're paying for to make it experience different than anywhere else in Plain. So anyway, thank you. Thank you for the interruption. I thought that was important for all of our guests to know here. John, I turn it to you, please.
Thank you very much. It's a good thing that I'm used to dealing with legislative bodies and people reserving their right to speak and fill their time. So, thank you. Good evening. I want to start by showing you my cards. They're going to be a pile right up here. For 28 years, I've represented the company around the globe, working development issues, working with local communities. And I will tell you that it is amazing the forward-thinkingness of this community on how they've looked at the community at large and the transportation network and so forth. And that starts with the leadership of a community. And I would be remiss not to thank Mayor Cheney, who's now come in, who's here, the members of the council that are all here, the Planning and Zoning Commission, because the engagement starts at the top. And it's reflected in the community, it's reflected in the staff of the city itself. So first and foremost, amazing, amazing team in Frisco versus all the jurisdictions I deal with around the globe. It really has been a great experience. So what I put up here for you all to see is a site plan. And I want to talk just a little bit about that site plan if I could. That site plan is laid out in a way that takes advantage of all the great work that not only has come through the years to the Fields team, thank you, Amy, for everything you guys have been forward thinking on, but more importantly, it takes into account the circulation of the site. To talk about the site a little bit, it is about a quarter of the size of one of our large parks. We felt that was the right feel, the right sense of community for not only this product, but for this community. And so as we look at the site, and understand when we look at a site, we don't look at, you heard Paige Thompson talk about a phase one. We look at the site in totality from the very beginning. Why do we do that? Because you got to plan for the infrastructure to be able to handle the full build out. Starting first and foremost with transportation and zeroing out the impacts to the local community. And that's first and foremost. Because at the end of the day, our workforce is going to live, work, and play in this community and are going to be looking at you every single day and hopefully with pride saying we're here and we're part of this community. So the site plan is intentionally laid out in a way that, as you can see, the park is up near the north side of the property. We did that intentionally so the ingress and the egress from the site is going to be off of the DNT and the top part of the project in the Fields Road as we come off. Why is that important? Because working with the city and the DNT and so forth, we can actually know what the stacking and queuing is going to be going into this property, and more importantly, make sure that that stacking and queuing happens on our site. Because again, understand the business that we're in. The business that we're in counts on repeat visitation. So we are as absolutely as vested as each and every one of you to make sure we're not doing anything to the transportation network that causes somebody to say, I'm not going through this, I'm not coming back again. Because the experience they're gonna feel comes off site. And how do they get onto our site? It's one of the reasons why, and I always talk about a program that we are heavily involved in, and it's not so much in Frisco here, but nationally, we've worked with a thing called the Model Ports of Entry. Why have we done that with the FAA and the airport councils and so forth? Because our guest experience comes through the community. And we could have the most phenomenal guest experience, but if they can't get to our site and can't get off our site, then we've got a problem and that repeat visitation doesn't happen. I could say, well, that sounds like a business reason. It is, but it shows you the motivation we're gonna have from day one to make sure it works. In fact, the very first decision we made when we decided to look at Fields as the Fields development is we looked at their consultants. They have the Kinley Horn team on, they've been working with the city for years and years. So what did we do? We hired Kinley Horn. Why? Because they had already done all the modeling and worked with you and done all the community meetings and they knew the flow patterns here. And we said to Kinley Horn, can this fit within that modeling? Can this fit within the neighborhood feel of where you live? And the answer has come back, yes. And that modeling is critical to ensuring that we're doing what's right, not only for our project, but for the surrounding community. So you can see on the layout, you have the park coming from the north side, but full disclosure, we have a 300-room, heavily themed hotel that will come off of Panther Creek there, okay? So that is right near the bottom. You see all the darker gray parking. You'd say, well, John, why is all that parking right there? Well, that's overflow parking that will come off of the north exit. Does not have any connectivity to the southern end of the property, okay? We do that so we understand the flows and understand, again, we have the right amount of parking and so forth on site to ensure we create that good customer experience. We also, though, more importantly, to create an immersive environment. An immersive environment means you're transporting someone to a place and time and a different feel. And to create that immersive environment, we need to put the guest in an inward thinking environment. Inward thinking means from sound, from lighting, from all those impacts. So it goes into the park to create that and creates that visual attenuation that you all want to ensure that the guest focus is in, not out. So again, something that very much works, and it's why when we said we're going to create a one-of-a-kind immersive environment for kids and families, that is actually the perfect product to put next to this community. So we talk about a quarter size, we talk about that feeling of a lush environment that Paige Thompson has said. If you look at all of our developments around the world, we take landscaping to the next level. We take that feel, and here you can see some of the look that we would have along Panther Creek, and on the side you can see where we would do Frisco and so forth. Why is that important? Because we have a horticultural group that is second to none and take pride in what we do. And that is, again, a very unique thing versus your average regional park. They don't have that infrastructure as companies. We do. So from a look, from a lush environment, from a feel on the transportation side, specifically to how we move people around this property, it's an inward thinking mindset with enough queuing and stacking to make sure that we're not impacting the local roadways. And working heavily with the city planners and DNT to ensure we have a dedicated access coming off that north side. Because with that, we are going to work very closely with you. Our guests, by the way, are coming at a time when you all have already left to go to your workplaces, and it's counter-cyclical to where the flows are to your community. That's the other benefit of having a park like this, because again, our ingress and egress patterns are counter-cyclical to what the community's patterns are. And that's key. It's key versus having a retail center right here where cars are coming and going every moment of the day. That's not here. They're going to come and they're going to spend the day, and they're going to have an on-site experience, and they're not going to be coming and going multiple times during the day. So from a traffic flow, from an impact of local neighborhoods, this modeling will actually be significantly reduced versus many other uses. So with that, I stand before you very proud of what we're going to do here, hopefully with all of you. Stack of cards. My cell phone is on it. I don't know how many people have stood before you and said, cell phone right here, call me. And sometimes when people call me, it's 2 o'clock in the morning if I'm in Japan, and I'll still pick up the phone. You'll be surprised. But take advantage of it if you have questions, because we're not being shy, we're not gonna hide. We're here to answer your questions, and most importantly, we're here to be part of this community just like each and every one of you. So with that, I'm glad to take any Q&A, and John, I think Joel wanted to talk a little bit about some of the local projects for transportation. Taking what Jason had sent us, Joel, if that's okay, or at least put up a map in case anybody has any questions. We could go to the last slide. Because one of the first things we did is we asked the community and the fields team, what are all those surrounding projects? Because we wanted to understand the timelines of their improvements. What is the capital budget of the city? What are the improvement timelines? When are they going to be coming online? Because again, guest experience is critical for repeat visitation, and we needed to understand the conditions of what is happening here from a capital. And I will tell you, having driven this entire community for the last 3-4 days, if many of you all saw me driving through your neighborhood, I'm not that single guy in a car you're worried about. I was driving to just understand the conditions, and I've literally driven every single one of these areas to understand the conditions. And I'm proud to say we are very confident with the Kimley Horn team that you have all the improvements necessary to make this area flow correctly. So with that, you want to say a comment?
So I'm Joel Fitz. I'm Transportation Planning Manager with the City of Frisco. And we've been, of course, working with the Fields team, with the entire Fields development for several years, building the planning infrastructure for that. And as this new project with the Universal Studios came in, we've been doing a more focused analysis of that more recently. And earlier you were given kind of a description of the roadways that are under construction, and you can see them on the map there. One that wasn't mentioned perhaps is the extension of Frisco Street south of Panther Creek Parkway. That's another project that will add connectivity to the area. It's not under construction as quickly as all these others. We're working on acquiring the right-of-way right now, south of Panther Creek Parkway. that's another road that will come in and give circulation to the area. And all, you see all these improvements on the tollway that was described to you earlier. So now I guess what I can talk about is a little more specifics about how the park will operate in terms of how we analyzed it. So in leading up to today, we did a lot of traffic analysis. We wanted them to use their traffic consultants to do some studies for us to show how it'll work, how it'll flow, and things like that. And one thing that we're going to do is that most of the traffic will be coming northbound on the tollway to exit at Fields Parkway, which is the new road being built on the north side of the park. And so we wanted to look at that. We wanted to make sure that at the busiest times, the traffic coming off the tollway would be able to move over and turn right and turn on Fields Parkway to get into the park. And part of that analysis is where we really realized that, this is, as he described earlier, a good situation in terms of the traffic coming to the park is not going in the direction of all the peak traffic of people going to work in the morning. And it's also not occurring at the exact same time. So for instance, the peak hour of people going to their jobs, is like between 7 and 8 a.m., so to speak. Whereas with the park opening at 10 a.m., you're not going to have the peak traffic of people arriving at the park coinciding with the peak traffic of everybody going to work or going to school in the morning. And that's key. One of the things whenever we analyze a new development anywhere, it's like, okay, how much traffic does it produce, but when does it produce it? And how does it interact with what else is going on? So that's one of those things where, something else could have developed on this land, whether it be office buildings or apartment buildings. They all would have a different pattern than this, which has people arriving, again, at a later time in the day, which is good that it doesn't coincide with the peak hour. And same thing in the evening, when people are coming home in the evening going north, these people will then be leaving the park and going south. So again, it's something where it's not all coinciding. They also all don't leave at the same time. If it was a bunch of office buildings at 5 o'clock, everybody leaves, that's a traffic congestion or focus of traffic. Whereas with a park like this, people, some people leave earlier in the day, they just kind of leave at different times of the day, and it's not quite as focused. So all those things kind of help when we watch the traffic, that it's the traffic modeling that didn't concentrate the traffic at the same times, what we call the commuter peak hours, is when people are commuting to and from work, those peak times, the park has traffic at different times, which is good. And because of that, one of the things that allows us to do is, for instance, on the northbound frontage road, Dallas Parkway, when in the morning when everybody needs to come to the park, we'll have these changeable lane assignment signs hanging over the lanes, like you see today. We have them on Main Street as you approach the tollway. If you're like in front of HEB going towards downtown, we have these signs above the lanes. Like some of the times this lane is right turn only, and sometimes it's through and right, where you can change what the lanes do. And that's those differences in patterns I was talking about is what makes it easy to do that. So we can handle heavy inbound traffic at a time when we don't need those lanes for commuter traffic. And then later in the day, when we do need those lanes for commuter traffic coming home, we can switch how the lanes operate, make them go through instead of right. So sometimes we'll have 2 lanes turning right from the frontage road towards the park, and sometimes just 1. So those are the kind of mitigations that we looked at with the traffic flow and the analysis that we did to make sure that we would get acceptable traffic operations. I think that's the... Yes, thank you. I forgot to mention that, is that even though it's open during weekdays, the amount of traffic coming on a weekday, in the times when there's heaviest commuter traffic, that's not the busiest days for the park. The busiest days for the park on the weekend. Another way of separating the heavy traffic flows that they have from your heavy traffic flows going to work and school and so forth. So that was another benefit that it's at a different time.
And we'll take a question or two in a second as we just wrap it up, but we will answer questions. So in conclusion for us, a typical entity will come in and purchase a piece of land, and they'll do it based upon the entitlement that exists on the land. Because of who and what we are and our history of knowing flows of our parks, we do things a little different. Before we made the announcement today, as you can tell from what Joel just said, we've done all the traffic modeling with them. Why? Because it's important before we buy a piece of land not to only know the entitlement that goes into the land and whether we can fit within that entitlement, but truly what are going to be the impacts. So I can't thank Joel enough and the city team who's been working with us. And as we look at where curb cuts we go and flows and so forth, and again, Mayor and team, the city staff has been fantastic. So with that, we are glad to answer questions and do Q&A, and I'll be glad to answer the easy ones, and we'll turn the hard ones over to Feeney here. Yes.
What do you anticipate the varies between weekday and weekend traffic to be? I guess another question. What is the plan for westbound traffic from Preston on Panther Creek? What is that?
Westbound on Panther Creek when it is extended through? Okay, and so, Joel?
Could you say it again?
I was just curious, the first question was, what is the variance between weekday and weekend traffic look like?
Oh, from the park. So for instance, the park they estimate that during a typical weekday they'd have like 7,500 visitors. Whereas what we analyzed too was like build out with future phases, it could be like 20,000 people on a Saturday, or a busy holiday or a Saturday. So yeah, there's a big difference between the weekend and the weekday.
Joel, if you can, I want to make sure everybody understands when he says 20, though, that is with the average of 3.2 people in cars and so forth. So it's not
Yeah.
20 into.
Right, yeah. People and cars totally different because, yeah, especially with families and so forth, there's 3.2 people per car on average. So it's and not only that, they all don't arrive at the same time. So for instance, they have a lot of data from their other parks. You know, they operated the parks in Florida and California for years and years. They have a lot of data. So like when do people arrive? So they gave us their patterns of how people arrive at their other parks so we can see how it's spread out during the day. And yes, there are peaks. But it all doesn't arrive at the same time, and doesn't all leave at the same time, which again is key.
As far as traffic's concerned, I was curious about if, in the traffic flow patterns, we're looking at future growth of Prosper and Salina and the traffic we're gonna get on northbound tollway from them and the rooftop development that's already planned for there, as well as all the fields development, not just for the universal ingress and egress. So my question is 4 lanes really enough in each direction on the northbound tollway to be able to handle the traffic, that the local people don't end up on the side street stuck in traffic constantly? Because right now going south, you can see the traffic in the mornings already. And especially since probably a lot of these studies were looked at during the time that there was COVID, like people aren't in the office for COVID, and now offices are starting to put people back into the office 3 to 4 to 5 days a week. So that's my question.
So yeah, the pandemic was a big issue with our industry in terms of analysis and studies. And again, we definitely do not base any of our analysis from the pandemic years. We didn't use, and this isn't just this project, any project we do, we don't take, our entire industry is like, well, we can't count traffic in 2020, we can't in early 21, we just don't base anything off of that because it's so unusual. So rest assured, we did not base any of the analysis off of pandemic years. And as we have tracked traffic patterns, we have counters around the city that constantly count traffic, and we saw the extreme dip in traffic, and it's almost back to where it was. So it's not something we base anything on pandemic. The study that they did, we always do want any analysis we do to look into the future. Like estimate future traffic. Don't look at today's traffic and add universal. Look at, estimate what's gonna be there because of all the growth, and then add universal, and that's what our studies do. The tollway, having 4 lanes is kind of a different issue than the city streets, because that's really a regional, you know, the tollway and the highways and the interstates and so forth, that's a regional traffic flow situation that the city doesn't really have a decision-making part of that. That's really up to NTTA and TxDOT and so forth, so it's up to them to whether that's enough lanes and so forth, but we do want to make sure that anything we do works with the highways as efficiently as they can. So what we don't want to do, and everybody who develops along the highway, you don't want to put in development that's going to back traffic up the ramp onto the highway. And so as long as everybody does their part with their developments on the roads, and that's one thing we looked at here, is we want to make sure that traffic's not going to be backed up up the ramp and onto the highway and cause problems for the region. Same thing. But yes, our analysis did take into account future growth.
Hey Joel, can you, I know a lot of questions are going to be on traffic, can you maybe touch on some local reference points, like what an FC Dallas game does, what a Rough Rider game does, what Stonebriar Mall, the Star, what those traffic flows are, and give them a frame of reference for a project like this?
Sure.
Second part is, you know, the question about, oh, the growth to the north. The entire region has seen this over the last 20 years, right? So the traffic patterns in North Dallas changed, when Plano developed, Plano traffic patterns changed, when Frisco started developing, and we're gonna see the same thing here in Rockford, so when it starts developing, that would be a great reference.
Sure. So, for instance, a busy game at Toyota Stadium, it's like 18,000 people come to that. So that just kind of gives you an idea of how many people are arriving. And that's another good thing, another comparison is when there's a game, like, you know, a game or concert at Toyota Stadium, everybody's kind of arriving at one time, and everybody's for sure leaving at one time. So those are very intense traffic movements. And we have a lot of experience of getting all that traffic in and then getting all that traffic out. But the good thing is in something like that, not everybody's going to be there at the exact same time, not everybody leaves at the exact same time. But if you want to see just a comparison in terms of numbers, then yes, 18,000 people would go to Toyota Stadium for a full event. I think that the Ford Center holds 12,000, I think. So a big event there, everybody going one time and then leaving at one time. Like Freedom Fest, you know, has a lot more. I want to say we have something like 30,000 cars come in and out of the downtown area during Freedom Fest. So those are just kind of some examples there. And yes, every city along the tollway has experienced the growth to the north continuing to happen and then pass through their city. You know, again, Plano used to be the city that was growing and all their traffic went down into Dallas. Now we grow, and then all our traffic's going through the tollway through Plano, and it will just continue. And the highway authorities, they plan for that, and that's why they're widening the tollway to 4 lanes in each direction right now.
So just eyeballing and looking at the parking lot, 1/3 or more of your parking lot is accessible only by Panther Creek Parkway. And if you look at it, one of the small roads has about 50 parking spaces. And about 30 of those fit into that spot. So you're talking about 1,500 parking spaces accessed only by Panther Creek Parkway. Now, if those are not for attendees to the park, then they're either for guests of the hotel or workers, which means that entire parkway is going to be full of 1,500 new cars every day, keeping those of us that live in Cobb Hill from using the north exit of our home every day. Can you please explain to me what your traffic pattern analysis says with regards to those parking spaces and how it's going to affect those of us that live in Cobb Hill Estates?
So yes, I'm glad you brought that up because we didn't really talk about the hotel and the staff members. So the employees at Universal are going to have the entrance off of Frisco Street, which is that big parking lot that you see along Panther Creek Parkway. It has a big entrance off of Frisco Street. So right there, right there. That's going to be the entrance and exit for the staff, the employees who work at Universal. The big parking lot south of the hotel, that's the one that's going to be, again, serving the hotel. And hotels don't have, office tower patterns or apartment complex patterns. People don't all arrive and leave in the morning and the afternoon, again, like a typical development that could have been here with like office towers and apartment buildings and things like that. Hotels, people come and go at different times, arrive at night and stay there for days, and come and go a little bit in other times of the day, peak time. So it's not going to be a super peak operation for the hotel. It just doesn't operate like an office tower would. But in terms of traffic operations along Panther Creek Parkway, one thing we do across the city, no matter what the development is if something comes in and then we watch the patterns and then eventually we see, is this a good location for a traffic signal? And that might be a location for a traffic signal that would again serve the neighborhood and the hotel. We don't know yet. We need to kind of see those patterns. Like for instance, we know there's going to be a traffic signal on the north side of the park where all the visitors go in and out. But the other locations, we kind of need to see how they operate and see how much. Sometimes traffic signals depend on the through traffic on the road you're on. So maybe it's going to be needed, but it's not going to be needed for 5 years or something like that. That's something we kind of watch once it opens and begin to analyze traffic and watch it continually. That's kind of how we decide whether to put in traffic signals as growth occurs all over the city.
Could you just show us with your arrow where the hotel is and where is the parking?
Right there is the hotel configuration, and the parking for that hotel is right below it. It's a little confusing because you see curb cuts, and so you're assuming that each curb cut is an access point for our employees. Some of those curb cuts are there for life safety reasons, for quick response by fire and police and so forth. So it doesn't assume that every single curb cut you see is going to be the entrance point or the entrance way. The idea of back of house, as you can see that building up there is back of house, and that's really where the employees will be geared towards coming in through there. So I can understand from the visual why you would assume that with the curb cuts, but curb cuts are also there for life safety reasons.
All those things that have like parallel lines, vertical, horizontal, and vertical, is that parking? What is it?
All of those are parking, okay, but not every one of those parking lots, as I'm saying, are accessed through Panther Creek, okay? And so it's a little bit of and I can understand exactly why you see that in the visual.
Earlier when you mentioned the trees and other plants lining the park and concealing it from view, are you going to be using species native to the local Blackland Prairie ecoregion, or are you using non-native species?
I love the question. You know much more about horticultural than I do, but I do. It's a serious question. I like it. We're going to be very cognizant of the environment, cognizant of what the flora should be for this site, with the caveat, though, where the park comes close on the side, if we create an immersive environment, that there may be plantings in that immersive environment to take you to a different place in time. So it's going to be a combination, but where we can, we absolutely are going to try to take advantage of the local flora, because we also have to deal with the local soil conditions as well that heavily impact it. So a great question. I'm just proud that we've got some of the world's best to deal with those questions, but where we can, absolutely.
Thank you. You've probably made this clear to everyone but me, but I just want to be sure. If I understood correctly, the only access off of Panther Creek is going to be to the hotel. Is that correct?
That is the intent.
That's the, well, intent versus, okay.
Well, again, it depends upon if there's an emergency condition, you always, you know.
Okay, I understand that, that's fine, okay. And I just want to be sure, so I heard that the employees would be entering off of Frisco, and so they're still going to have ingress and egress off of Fields?
Yeah, again, yes, as you come around, and again, all that is based upon the modeling that already exists within the traffic flows that the Fields group has worked out. Yep, thank you. Right there.
Now, there's gonna be a buffer zone between, the neighborhood and, will there be a buffer zone between the Cotton Hill neighborhood and the
Yes, up there on the plan, as you can see, is a pretty good line of almost a doubling of the landscape area between that. And also, it's hard to see, but you can see a little bit on the bottom, where we can, we'll also use berming and so forth to create that elevation change and also have that screening effect. So the answer is absolutely, that's our intent.
Yeah, well, you have pretty much your entire city council here, so I didn't want you to think we're like hiding here in the front, not willing to answer your questions too, so feel free to ask us questions. I'll just kind of give a quick few commentary notes. Like, all the questions you're asking are the same immediate reactions that city council had when this idea was proposed to us. We had the opportunity to go to Orlando to kind of visit and see it with our own eyes. Quite honestly, we took some of our biggest skeptics on council, including Angela Appella, who grew up near Universal Studios in Orlando, and she was a hard no going into it, and then coming out of it when we saw it with our own eyes. I don't want to say how she's going to vote, but she's definitely a much more optimistic supporter, I would say. One thing I do want to kind of bring up, that City Council worked with Fields, and we worked with the neighborhoods when we did the Field zoning case. I think many of you were part of those conversations, where we kind of sat down with all of you and said, hey, we want to put into place height restrictions, we want to be good neighbors with Cobb Hill and Emerson Estates and all the surrounding communities, and really come up with a master plan that you're proud of. And so you were all a big part of that master planning process when we come up with Fields. For those of you that were part of those conversations, you'll remember that what was planned for this site was much more dense than what is being proposed. The traffic impacts of high-rise, office, mixed-use, hotel, all the uses that were planned for this site would have probably been thousands of more cars a day. So what is being proposed here in this project, as was stated by city staff, was actually very much a strategic decision, because we have 20 miles of Dallas North Tollway frontage. When you consider 10 miles north and 10 miles south, that goes from 121 to 380. And if we develop that all with all the office towers, all mixed use, that's where long-term we would have real traffic problems. As was mentioned, everyone getting out at 8 a.m., trying to get there at 8 a.m. and leaving at 5 p.m. And so it's very intentional to try to find other uses along that tollway frontage that uses the tollway during different peak hours, which is being spoken about tonight. So it's a very complementary use from a traffic pattern. And then Universal has already been an incredible partner. I mean, we told them months ago, we said, these are going to be the first things the neighbors say when they show up to Trent Middle School and raise their hands. They're going to say, what are the number of cars on Panther Creek? How are you getting people in and out? We don't want the main entrance to be on Panther Creek. And so they were the first ones to say, no problem. We will move it to Fields Parkway. We're going to plan our entire design around that. We'll make our employees use this entrance. In fact, we're going to make it so inconvenient to use Panther Creek to access here, no one would want to do it. Now, you'll have some cars, people coming from Preston. It's, it's an arterial roadway system, so there will be some of that. But they very much were great partners on that. We challenged them on this whole landscape buffer thing. When we would do our calls, we're like, yeah, we've seen pretty pictures before with developers that show these renderings of greenery, and then it's built and it's open and they've got 2-inch trees and a couple little shrubs, and it doesn't live up to the expectations of what they promised. And we showed up to Universal Orlando, and you would not know that there was a theme park there. I don't know how many of you have been there. I hadn't been there before I visited it here a couple months ago. We drove every single road around it, and we didn't even know it was there. And that was their full-blown theme park that's 4 times the size. It has roller coasters, people screaming. And so they absolutely deliver on that promise. They showed us how after they opened in Florida, how all these high-end neighborhoods came in after the fact. Like they wanted to be next to what they built there. And what's being done here is something very different, something very unique. And so they, 100%, we expect them to continue to be a great partner, to listen to all your feedback. That's why tonight is so important, to really kind of hear concerns that you have living nearby, how they can address that, and it will evolve the plan. I mean, even kind of hearing the curb cuts and the employees that some city council can take back and make sure as we're going through the zoning case that that's addressed. But I just wanted to get up and say we're available for questions tonight too. And don't be shy with sharing any concerns that you have.
So I have a question in reference to, we live in Cobble, and currently there are cars, trying to cut through the neighborhood and they speed. So what about the presence of, police? It seems like we're gonna be boxed in, okay, for Cobble. So I'm just trying to figure out the constant car that we see currently speeding in the neighborhood, not stopping at stop signs. It's a pain. So I don't let my kids down in the front.
So I think that one thing that's going to help is, one issue that the neighborhood has dealt with is that you're kind of on the end of a dead-end piece of Panther Creek Parkway. Not all the roads are built yet around the area. Frisco Street doesn't continue through, Panther Creek doesn't continue through, so people look at your neighborhood as a way to cut through and get around. And so we've always known that as soon as Panther Creek Parkway goes all the way to Preston, and as soon as Frisco Street goes north and connects to Panther Creek Parkway, there's now going to be an arterial route around you, and that should decrease the need for anybody to think they need to, get through you to get somewhere, because now there's going to be an arterial road that's a faster, easier way for them to go. So there should be less traffic cutting through your neighborhood once the other roads are built. And that's kind of a growing pain that other parts of the city have experienced too. Once the ultimate roads are there, then the people trying to do something to get around and sneak and find a back way to get somewhere, that kind of goes away, because now there's a way to go where they don't have to go through your neighborhood, they can go up Frisco Street, Panther Creek Parkway. So that definitely, I think, is going to help a lot with that.
I've got 2 questions. You're talking about the traffic patterns around Universal Park. Well, what happens when the development north of that, the Frisco development opens up? What do you guys think is going to happen with the traffic then? And then my second question is directed Mayor Cheney. Why are we building apartments on every single corner throughout the city?
So the apartment question is one that we've been tackling for decades now. So there was a time in the 80s here in Frisco that there wasn't a lot of oversight in zoning cases. And every cattle rancher in town came to city council and they asked for zoning requests for apartments. And they got it. And so there was a time in Frisco's history, and John can correct me on the numbers, but I think we had 90,000.
About 70,000. We've reduced it down.
So at one point there were 70,000 entitlements for apartments in Frisco. 70,000. That's almost that's probably more, as many homes as we have right now. And so actually the city's been working for decades to remove that zoning. And so every single zoning case that comes through a plan development where we negotiate apartments out of it. In fact, there's a case in council this Tuesday where we're negotiating with the development to remove that. And so it's been a long-standing fight. And so one of the things is that a lot of the developers that come to our city now, just because of the success Frisco has had, they actually want to do world-class developments, like a Fields or, you name it, the Star and Frisco Station. And so they don't want to do garden-style variety apartments. That's usually the ones that you see that have the surface parking that, maybe look okay for a couple years, but 10 years later they don't. So that is something Frisco's been able to get rid of almost entirely. And so really the only entitlements that you see in Frisco
are in very strategic mixed-use developments. You know, where it's the work, live, play aspect, where you need some multifamily there to support the restaurants and retail. So areas that are directly adjacent to the Dallas North Tollway, like the Star, for instance. The Star in Frisco Station, that's an area that very much makes sense, where if you're gonna have multifamily housing, it's there. It's in a structured parking environment, it's very high end. They'll be nice 30, 40 years from now. You look at the projects that were done at Shops at Legacy, you know, where those apartments have been in there for decades, still very nice, very desirable place to live. That's where Frisco is focusing our attention on. Unfortunately, once zoning is in place, you know, there is state property laws where there's little that we can do. And so it is a very common misperception here in Frisco that when apartments are built, that they were just approved. But most of what you're seeing that's being built may have been approved decades ago. And now it's just being executed on.
Yeah, Mayor, let me, well, Mayor.
To that question, the last 2 years at the council annual work session, I've shown a map of where people have come in, visited with me, asked them to do multifamily here, have it circled, and this is where I've told them no. And it's up to the developer if they want to submit, but you don't see a lot of apartments that don't get built because they never follow through, because it would be a zoning change. So as the mayor stated, it's only in selected location where we approve apartments in the future, but there's old zoning out there that we have to honor, like on the Brinkman Ranch. There's an agreement where that density was reduced from like 18,000 units down to 9,000.
When you say that, it doesn't help. When you say they're building 40,000 homes, that they're only gonna build 3,000. That's 3,000, 6,000 more apartments.
There's been a substantial reduction.
Yeah, I'd like to know, we talked a lot about traffic patterns, and I'll take your word on that for the moment, but my home is probably one of half a dozen that are closest to this park, and I'm really curious, what is your vision for the park in terms of noise, in terms of sight lines, and in terms of, you know, I don't imagine you're putting 300-foot roller coasters for 3 to 9-year-olds, but what does this park look like for those of us that are going to see it and hear it every day?
Right, okay, well, first of all, there'll be a landscape buffer around the whole park. And inside the park, we're gonna have 4 to 5 themed lands. So if you go into this land, we wanna plunge you into the world of that story. So, just for the sake of argument, I'm not saying we're building this, okay? But just for the sake of argument, let's say it's Shrek's land, okay? Shrek lives in the swamp. So you're gonna go into an environment that looks like swamp. The music in that land would be music from the Shrek movies. Next door to that land is going to be another land. I don't know what character it was. We don't want the music or the sound from the Shrek land to bleed over into the next land, because that would ruin the experience of being an immersive place. So we're trying to contain the sound within that land, not within the park, but just within a piece of the park. So we're going to work very hard to contain that sound within each of those themed lands. So we don't want the sound to escape even from a land, let alone from the park.
Yeah, what about just visually height of rides and?
Thank you, sorry. The tallest, all these rides in the park are designed for little kids. So we're not gonna have any of the big dark rides or huge buildings we have in Orlando or any of the giant roller coasters. The height of the biggest roller coaster we're looking at right now is somewhere between 40 and 50 feet. That's the tallest ride in the entire park. So it's not going to be anything like what you see in Orlando, where we build, 90, 100 feet tall type of structures, because the little kids wouldn't enjoy it. So we're not going to build anything like that.
What about the hotel, the height of the hotel?
The height of the hotel, we don't have a number on that. We're probably looking somewhere in the 4 to 5 story type of range. It's not going to be a giant skyscraper type hotel. We'd like to spread it out as much as possible to keep it as low as possible. So I don't have a final number on that, but that's our intention. I was just talking to our chairman today, who was here at our press conference about it, and he really wants it to be a lower height building.
Along those lines, in regards to the park, how much of the park will be indoors, how much of the park will be outdoors?
Right. Well, here in Dallas, we know that not today, it was quite hot today, but we know it gets cold sometimes in the winter, we know it gets very hot in the summer. So So we're going to have in every one of these themed lands I talked about, we're going to have a place where people can go and store indoors and get out of the heat, whether it's a restaurant or a building. And we're also very excited about the possibility of having school groups and summer camps and people like that. So we're going to build a building where all of the kids can get inside and get out of the heat or the cold. I don't have an exact percentage for you or anything like that, but it's definitely our intention to make sure people have the ability to get out of the elements.
What do you plan for your park hours? Because you can buffer the park and the lights and everything, you can't buffer the skies. To be honest, I don't want to see or hear fireworks over here.
It's a park for kids that are 3 to 9 years old, and we really aren't going to spend our money on fireworks because I think at nighttime, people are going to want to take their kids home and have dinner with their kids. So we aren't going to be open late. I don't know the exact hours, and there might be a day when we have different hours than this, but I would envision on the weekdays it would maybe be something like 10 o'clock in the morning to 6 o'clock at night. And on the weekends, we might go from 10 to 7 or something like that. But we're just not, I mean, if we stayed open late, I don't think people would be there. It doesn't make any economic sense for us to stay open when people aren't there. So I think you'll find the hours to be very conducive to making sure everybody who's home that night is going to have a nice relaxing evening.
I have a question for the city, really. We got so much building going on the north side of Panther Creek, basically from Lone Star High School to the toll road. It's gonna be very difficult for the folks that live over to the west side of Teal to get over to this territory, especially when Fields West gets built. When are you gonna enlarge Panther Creek to 6 lanes all the way to Teal or to 423? And when are we gonna get a second bridge on Teal between Panther Creek and PGA Park?
So the arterial network in the city is generally built first as 4 lanes with the room to widen to 6 when eventually it's needed. And actually that's what's happening right now. It's being
Only
widened
down
to...
to the entrance.
I'm sorry?
It didn't, only down to the entrance into the north side or into the Fields property on the north side. Why didn't you just continue down to Teal?
Right, well, money. It's a lot of money to widen roads. So it is done in phases based on the need. So like the roads that we're widening now is based on the need that we're seeing now. And then, we have roads all over the city that need to be widened from 4 to 6. So we have to look at the growth pattern and say, okay, and then we have like a 5-year plan. It's like, okay, we're gonna widen this one from 4 to 6 next year, and this one, 3 or 4 roads next year, 3 or 4 roads the year after that. So it's done in phases so that we can take the money we have and spread it around and do the same thing everywhere. Because growth is occurring throughout the entire city, and we have to widen it in different places all over. The second bridge on Teal is going to start being a design so that we can at least get a preliminary design and a cost out of it, so that we can then know how much money we need to budget for it, and then decide whether we need, to plan for it in like 2 or 3 years, that kind of a thing. We're really kind of waiting to see how the first PGA tournament goes, to then see, okay, that's going to factor into not just normal traffic, but also the PGA tournament. Like, do we need to have that bridge in before the next tournament in 2025? And so one of those, that decision is going to be made probably after the tournament we have in May for the second bridge on Teal.
And so I know we have probably some old timers here in the crowd that have been here 20 years or so. And those of you old timers here know what real traffic problems are. Back when it used to take 45 minutes to go a mile sometimes on El Dorado. But what we used to hear at these town hall meetings back then, I know I'm getting a head nod over here from Tracy, is, well, why are you so reactive on your road construction? Like, why don't you build these roads in advance? You know it's coming, so why wait? And so, council at one point we said, well, that's pretty smart, we agree with that, and we're gonna change our strategy with that. And so that's why you saw these local bond elections. You're gonna have another bond election this May that's gonna have more road money. But a lot of these roads were put in well in advance, and if you actually look at our capital spending right now, I want to say, I looked at it at one point, it's over $100 million, am I right? That's going into Northwest Frisco alone, just for roads. Like, when you're saying our road budget that we have, we're dumping almost all of it right now into Northwest Frisco. because we know this is coming. We need to be prepared for it. We don't want to be in a town hall like this 2 years with all of you yelling at us saying, you knew this was coming, why didn't you get in front of this? And so that's why Legacy is being built. Legacy will be one of the most expensive roads we ever built as a city. The bridge that goes across that creek, Femi can tell, he's writing the bill for the check for it, so he knows to the penny probably how much it costs. But very expensive. That's why the Teal Bridge, very expensive. But the point to Joel is that council has prioritized as part of the city to be prepared for what we know is coming, so we don't have some of these same traffic problems that we had 10, 15 years ago, which those of you that were around, it was a nightmare getting around the city.
Thank you, Mayor. So if I may, I'm gonna just give you 1 second. So I love to say that I'm originally from Istanbul, Turkey. I came to Dallas 44 years ago. I am so proud to call Texas home, Dallas home. I really mean that. But when I came here, Beltline in Edison was dirt road. Tollway wasn't there. Prosper, Salina, I never heard the names of those cities. And so what I do, part of my job, is to sell North Texas. So I'm responsible, Toyota North American headquarters coming to Legacy West, JP Morgan Chase, Liberty Mutual, FedEx home office headquarters, Boeing Global Services, their headquarters. They all moved to Legacy West. And that created incredible amount of jobs, incredible amount of opportunities for our communities. When you look at your growth in Frisco, in Prosper, Salina, it's a result of those companies relocating. We live in Texas. We live in North Texas. We continue to attract companies. We actually continue to attract talents. The positive immigration to Texas, North Texas, is second to none. And it's going to continue. So the Prosper and Salina, if you look at their demographics, they are saying they are going to be bigger cities than Frisco and Plano. They have the land. So the growth is going to take place because we live here. But I also watched, I'm fortunate to travel around the world, around other parts of the United States. You go to New York, you go California, you go other places. Roads take decades. They can't build the things. I mean, you know, so that you come here, you look at it, the tolls, George Bush Parkway, extension of NTTA, you go to Westlake, you go to South Lake, the growth that taking place everywhere. That is Texas, that is North Texas. I think we built more highways and all that. Yes, traffic is not the same, but it's gonna continue. But they are doing a lot of things. They are not sitting. Believe me, if it was happening in California or somewhere else, you wouldn't see 4th lane being built on tollway. They are being proactive. They agreed with us. They saw it, the fields development coming. They tear down. Go and look at, drive by fields, underbridge, completely torn down, so they are widening to accommodate. So they are local officials, everyone working, because we live really great state of Texas, enormous amount of growth. We continue to attract people, all our jobs. Every one of your children, families, we work on these places. We're proud that Toyota chose Plano, Legacy West, after 60 years in Torrance, California. They came to Texas. JP Morgan Chase, so that I'm not saying that in unrespectful way. Our property is zoned for any type of development. So that 100 acres, we can put JP Morgan Chase campus, which is in Legacy West. It is 50 acres. Currently, Chase has 16,000 employees working there. And every day they go in and out. And then double that, there can be 32,000 people working on that 100 acres. So, and then we have the entitlement. Yes, they can build it, but we're not. So when I looked at the Universal, I really gave a lot of thoughts. How does it impact? How does it impact our neighbors? How does it impact overall fields development, what it does? So when you look at quality development of Legacy West or Legacy, when I sell land to anybody, even Toyota, even Chase, even Liberty Mutual, what we call BSRA, Building Site Restrictions Agreement. and we tell them what they are gonna build, how they are gonna do their fence, their landscaping, their signage, their lights. All that becomes a recorded document that where we control. We say, you cannot do that. So when I met the Universal people first time, as mayor said, after their visit, they assured us, normally we put screening requirements. We want to make sure. I don't want to see thousands of cars from Fields West, our development, and surface parking. They assured us, showed us the plan, we approved them. They're going to have incredible buffer. They said, Timmy, don't worry, because we don't want people to see inside. We want them to come inside of our park and not to see what's in there. Discover when you come inside of our park. So we got comfort on landscaping and buffering they are going to put around their property. So I asked the questions, hours of operation. It was very important. A very reputable developer like John Landon, who purchased the East Village, committed building 870 homes next to them. He said, Femi, how I'm going to sell my homes? How I'm going to do? What are the hours of operation? We sit down and understood that what they said. And there are certain restrictions on those hours that is in place, that they cannot open more than this clock, that clock. They are already in these documents. So there are a lot of things that you're asking. And as Mayor Cheney said, the council members, they already answered. And I can tell you with great comfort that what they are gonna do is gonna be much less traffic than if we were to build a JP Morgan Chase campus or Liberty Mutual or anything else that our zoning entitles. So they really, they've been a great partners, top to bottom, working with us, working with Joe, traffic department, answering every question. They recreational land, so they can do turning lanes into their development from towing. And we changed the patterns. Joe insisted putting roundabout. I don't like roundabout, but he wanted to slow down the traffic, and we put 2 of them on Frisco Street. So, and there is enormous amount of thought process went in every step of that, and I can look at each one of you in the eye and tell them these people mean what they say, and they are doing what they are saying to deliver. So, I mean, I want to leave on that one. So that really, I mean, the questions asked about tollway, and you know, I go up and down the tollway every day. I see the tollway, but those are super regional issues that I believe TxDOT tollway authorities are doing much better than job than in other states, in other places in North Texas. Believe me, the roads infrastructure second to none and continue. But yet, we attract people. They keep coming to Texas because we have jobs, we have talent, and they want to come in. And they're growing, and some of the growing pains are going to happen as part of it. So anyway, is there any other question that our team is getting? Like, yes, sir.
So on that corner, Woody Creek Station, on the corner of the Panther Creek and the tollway, is that all open parking, flat space? That the plan would go on.
Okay, of course. The parking space at the corner of the tollway and Panther Creek, is that tarmac open, or is this planned to be a raised structure?
At grade.
At ground, so yeah, there you go, the left, the gray parking, so that's all gray top?
That's at grade.
Okay, and then, is there any sense of raised structures for parking on that whole space, or is it all ground level?
It's at grade in phase 1, and if we come back and change that, we'd be meeting with you in the city of any future, but right now it's all at grade.
Yeah, and the reason I'm asking is I'm not ignorant enough to think that like, we're not gonna ever develop that, but I think we've done a good job of putting parking structures in that maximize the use of the land. So I'm interested from the council's perspective, is that something that we're targeting to get a better use of the space instead of just, you know, blacktop for what looks like acres?
Yeah, I'll answer the question. So I don't like surface parking myself too. That's I'm gonna hide it with the landscape. But their goal is really
about page, but what I've been told over and over, that this is the first one in the world. They chose this location, first one. So obviously they're going to do huge investment, and they're hoping it will be hugely successful. And the success continue, they are going to do the second phase. When they do the second phase, there will be structural parking, and that's their game plan. Yes, ma'am.
The reason we don't start with structured parking is it's expensive to build, and I'd rather invest the money in making the park great so the guests have a really great experience than invest in the parking at this stage of the process.
Real quick. If you have questions, I'd like for you to come on down, because we have to be out of this facility by 8:30, and I want to wrap up the meeting about 8:20. So if you have questions, please come up.
I have two questions. One, I would like to hear about a little bit more about economic development and the impact of the city of Frisco. And second, for the parking, I know a lot of people have electric cars and hybrid cars, and I was wondering if you have thought about adding that to the site for people to charge their vehicles.
The answer to the electric is yes. We will have charging stations. I don't know exactly how many right now, but whatever is appropriate.
I'll try to be more brief since we have a lot of questions. Economic impact we anticipate being significant. I mean, it's a major investment, obviously tourism dollars, sales tax, hotel fees, so forth, just another tourism. Oh yes, and we're still kind of working on, potential incentive agreements. Any incentive agreements the city does is always performance-based.
But understand there will be certain access points to get to the facility. So really, when you talk surrounding area, they're gonna have to go to the certain areas, entrance to a certain area.
Hi, I believe this question is directed towards Mr. Thompson. We've heard, honestly, I live in Concord, so we are right behind the theme park. So my concern is we've heard a lot about the concerns, the traffic that's going to come, no matter what. I believe you, with good intentions, but the fact is we are going to face extra traffic. There is a whole lot of, in the meantime, we're going through construction, which is lots of traffic. My concern is, historically speaking, with all your other theme parks, what has happened to the property values of the houses around 10, 15 years down the road, given that traffic is only going to increase, chances of more infrastructure coming in to relieve it is minimal. So what has happened? I really would like data, like some numbers in the sense of percentages, whether it's an increase, decrease, or do they all become Airbnbs now? Because we are within walking distance of that park.
I will tell you, we don't have a set of data per se, but I will tell you I'm not aware of a single, and I track real estate issues for the company, I'm not aware of a single surrounding area from us that has not gone up in value. As for the, you mentioned the Airbnb, I'm very sympathetic to that because then you get into all kinds of questions of are you collecting resort taxes, which by the way only helps with the infrastructure of the community and so forth. So those kind of issues though, you have to look at your homeowners association and what the restrictions are when it comes to those kind of things. Because we really don't have control over that. Other than that, we do, as somebody who's gonna build a hotel, get upset when somebody tries to get around and rent out their place and not collect the resort taxes, which then is hurting everybody in the community. So, I would just encourage you to look at your HOA docs on vis-a-vis that. the property values have gone up in all the circumstances around our parks, and I deal with, in Orlando alone, there are 6 surrounding HOAs that I deal with. So, yeah, we track those kind of issues because understand in many cases, it is some of our own workers that want to buy in there and so forth. We understand what the local market is doing. And more importantly, again, we want to work closely with all those HOAs because guess what? This isn't just getting approved. We're not going away. We're going to continue to work long after we're open with the HOA and deal with any concerns that are raised. We're not disappearing once we get our approval. That's not how we interact.
So that's a common question we have about property values. We hear it almost every development that's done in the city, whether it's a Walmart or an HEB or Hall Park expanding, what is it, concerns about what it does to the property values. As someone who's in the business, honestly, I've got friends here in the audience that rely on me for real estate opinions that are kind of staring at me, what do you think, Jeff? And, truthfully, I would say as honest as I can be, I think it's the neighborhoods that are adjacent to this are probably gonna have the highest increases in property values in Frisco. I mean, I would tell my clients looking to buy there that I would be super bullish on these neighborhoods because anytime you have proximity to amenities, just think of a family with young kids that you can buy a season pass to one of the greatest kids theme park in the entire world and walk across the street and have daily access to that. That is a powerful selling proposition. What's that? Well, if you live there, you may walk, but if you're driving in a park and going around, but you kind of get the point. But I'll also say this to some of the kind of the tangent concerns that anytime we do a big project like this, we don't have all the answers today because we don't know all the problems today, right? Something opens up, we kind of live and we learn, and it's been with that with every project. And we work with continue to work with the residents, Joel and his team, development services, our partners, and we change things to incorporate all these data points, and we do that all the time. If there was a problem with parking on the streets, y'all would flood the mayor and council's email boxes, right, and say, you promised us you would fix this. And you know what? We'll show up there, we're gonna figure out how to fix it. So there is gonna be some of those kinds of things as we continue the dialogue and the partnership with the surrounding communities.
So 2 more, and then this gentleman here and the lady back there.
So I have 2 questions, very short. First, will you work with the Cobb Hill Estates Homeowner Association with the problems that will come as a result of this? Okay, I'll take you on that, and I will write your name down, and I'll make sure our president has it. I know, I've already got it. I've got 2, and I'm going to give one to our president.
Post-opening, pre-opening, I'm the guy you're going to be dealing with.
Got it.
Pre and post. I'm not the secretary. I'm not that old, I hope. So I'm going to be there for a while.
Mr. Mayor, will you work with Cobb Hill Estates on the problems that he says they're not going to study for 5 years after this thing opens? Because my math is, if it opens in 2025, which is very unrealistic, it would be till 2030 before we ever have any studies on whether or not there ought to be a stoplight on Panther Creek. So what I want to know is, will you, as a part of all of this, interact with Cobb Hill Estates on the issues that we're going to have with increased traffic, with increased crime, and will Frisco Police Department commit to patrolling this area because the Department of Public Safety doesn't do their job on the tollway?
Yeah, I mean, 100%. That's why your city council is here. I mean, we've done that as a community. We continue to do that. Just for instance, with our police department and our fire department, when we opened the Star for the first time, it was the first time we ever had high-rise structures in the city. And we heard all these complaints. We're not prepared as a city to serve as high-rise. How is our firefighters don't know how to fight those buildings? We don't have the right fire trucks to operate. What's the training? Our police department, what's the crime gonna come? All these kinds of things. And we've continued to kind of work through that, giving them the tools that they need. Look, we're proud of everything that we're known for as a city, and when we did our big press conference today, we got to rattle off our brag page as the #1 city to live in, the #1 city to raise a family, all these different things that we're known for as a community. Why all of you moved here, quite frankly, to be a part of what's happening here. That's important for us to remain. And so we're never going to do a project where we sacrifice any of those kinds of things. Any project that we do in Frisco and have done in Frisco is going to be with the best brands in the world, whether it's the Dallas Cowboys, hold your opinion until after Monday, PGA of America, we only work with the best brands literally in the world because we have that reputation. The best developers. You know, when you get a Phoebe Carahan in the Fields that are the best known in all of DFW that say we want to come work in Frisco, that's a reputation that we want to maintain. And Universal picked us. Like, we didn't go out across the country and say, hey, we're going to try to recruit Universal. They called us and they said, you know what? Your vision and your values align with who we are as a company. We want to be in a city that wants to be world-class. We want to be in a city that's family-friendly, cares about its residents. We want to be in a city that's safe and is known as the safest community in the country. That's what we want to be a part of. That's what our value system is, and that's what Frisco represents. And they called us up and said, we love the energy of the city, and we love what you're doing. Can we be a part of it? And then this council was hard on them. I mean, quite frankly, but the first night we heard about it, we were kind of like, you know, Universal, they're a great brand. They're known across the world. They're the kind of brands we like to work with. But every single question that you guys have mentioned tonight was the first executive session out of this council's mouths. We got to solve, we can't stand up in front of the public. We haven't solved traffic. We can't stand up in front of the public and look people in the eye unless we know for certain it's not going to impact safety in this community. You know, that it's not going to maintain to be a great place to live. That's not going to add value. So everything that we want to bring to the city is only to make the lives of these families better. That people in the audience and families like mine, my kids are older now. I would have loved to have had this in Frisco when my kids were younger. We would have bought the season pass. We would have been there 3 days a week. We would have done all those things. You know, now I get to look forward, like many of you, to doing these things with my grandkids. Right here in my city, making lasting memories, lifetime memories, right here, 5 minutes from my house. That is really, really cool and exciting. And all the concerns that you have, this council is committed to solving. And there's going to be some that come up, like we said, after the fact, like, gosh, we should have thought of that. How did we not think of that? That was so obvious, but let's go fix it. And we're going to do that, we're committed to doing that.
I'll just real quick, you absolutely have our commitment. We look at you know, our crime stats and we compare them to other cities, and we did a lot of research and presented to council on similar type amusement theme parks and the communities around them. We looked at that, and so, but one of the things I always say is we never look at our crime stats and say we're good. We always look at our crime stats and say, how can we get better? So we are, you know, we spent a lot of focus at our department over the past few years in ramping up our infrastructure to hire. Fast forward to today, you know, we are hiring officers from all over the country now. So we're benefiting from great experience from a lot of different places, and as thankful to the efforts of our HR department, council for making sure that we have good pay and benefits. And we are stealing a lot of officers from other communities because they want to work here because of opportunities like this. So you absolutely have our.
You know, I'm a criminal defense attorney. Those are my 2 kids back there, and we moved here because of you. I practice in Denton, Collin County, and you're the best police department in the world.
Just because I am also concerned about VRBOs and losing neighborhoods and communities, do you anticipate a certain percent of visitors being outside of DFW?
The typical profile of what is going to be our typical day guest is not somebody that's going to come in and do a week-long stay. Will they maybe do a multiple day, 1-2 days? Yes, but pretty much the typical is the greater outside region here is going to be the bulk of our visitation. So the answer is I'm very sympathetic again for all the reasons why I said before, and we'll continue to work with the local community on the issue because it's something we are very hypersensitive to because of those that are trying to get around the rules. So we'll work with you.
Just real quick, so John Letler and his team, they actually put into place a VRB ordinance, a short-term rental ordinance that is really kind of considered the gold standard now. A lot of other communities are copying it. But truthfully, where that's controlled is at an HOA level. So if you as neighborhoods decide that you don't want VRB rentals in your neighborhoods, That's an HOA vote that you very much can take on.
Well, we need it. I need to be out of here by 8:30. The school district. Hey, I want to thank you, everybody, for coming. If you do have additional questions, John McReynolds has left his card, the mayor and council, planning and zoning commission, as well as myself, John Limer, director of development services. You can just send us emails with your questions. Thank you very much.